What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot to get into in the world of volleyball, such as George Mason upsetting UC Irvine on the road. How did the Patriots do it? Also, how about Lewis upsetting BYU? Big win for the Pilots as they're looking pretty good. And UCLA continues to kick butt and take names as they took down Lewis and Loyola on the road. How will they fare in the First Point Collegiate Challenge? Speaking of which, that's going to be this week, Friday and Saturday. If you haven't gotten your tickets, do so right away as it's going to be fun. It's going to be a barn burner, a humdinger, everything of that sort. We have some NCAA women's volleyball transfers to go over, as well as a little bit of NCAA women's volleyball news. So hand me a volleyball, set up the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IESR Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday morning, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way to episode 229 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live on Spreaker. Please do follow IE Sports Radio on social media on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We also have a Facebook page. All you just have to do is type in the word IE Sports and Radio in the search bar, like us, and then that's how you're able to follow us on Facebook. We also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, for all your latest sports news, blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month, pages dedicated to each podcast, such as Set Point, our community forum, and our merchandise shop. For the last 9 years, going on 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. A huge shout to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, the single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, it's low in sugar and high in protein. This is some of the best jerky you can get your hands on, and all you have to do is visit www.planetjerky.net and place your order. In addition, prices on the jerky are slashed, and if you order $50 or more, you will get your order for free. Huge shout out once again to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet. And the way you could follow Set Point on social media is on X, formerly known as Twitter, at set_point.ie, and on Instagram at set_point.iesr. And you can follow me, Teran Rodriguez, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Teran Rodriguez1. That's where I'm mainly active. And without any further delay, let's get started. So we have quite a bit of NCAA men's volleyball to get into. And we have to recap week number 2 as we have quite a bit of matches. It was such a fun week. And it all started on Monday as we had Loyola hitting the road to Northern California to take on Stanford. And the two already met the previous day or day earlier, but Loyola didn't really play their stars as I mentioned in the previous episode. But this matchup was all that and a bag of chips. So it was on Pac-12 Network, and just got to throw that out there. And then Stanford was basically who we thought they were. And it was at Maples Pavilion. I just got to throw that in there as well, just because the previous game was played at Burnham Pavilion, which is the smaller gym. But for Loyola and Stanford jumped out to an early 2-0 lead. They took the first and second set by scores of 25-21, 25-27, or 25-17. And then Loyola took the third set 25-18. And then the fourth set, it was just back and forth. It was the tightest of the 5 sets. Yes, this one did go 5 sets. There are 18 ties, 9 lead changes. It looked like Stanford was going to have the lead, but to Loyola's pleasure, they were able to hold on, take the fourth set 27-25. It had to go extra as Loyola did have a little bit of a lead, and then Stanford clawed their way back, but they were able to hold on and take that fourth set, forcing a fifth set. And then the fifth set, it was pretty much all Stanford. They never trailed. There were 3 ties, but Stanford was just taking charge. It was courtesy of Will Rotman and Moses Wagner. Even Kevin Lamp had a couple of hands in there as well. And even though Loyola made it interesting in this set, Stanford took it 15-12 as they improved to 2-0, while Loyola dropped to 1-3. Will Rotman led the way with 20 kills, and he hit 515, while Moses Wagner had 16 kills, he hit 444. Kevin Lamp added 10 kills, as Stanford as a whole hit 436, and they outdug Loyola 34-21. Loyola was led by Miller Truby, who had 11 kills, while Jake Reed had 9 kills. Jimmy Meinhardt also added 8 kills, and Colton Brooks and Parker Van Buren added 7 kills. So Parker Van Buren only played 2 sets. He was nowhere to be found in sets 3, 4, and 5. That could be because he's had a gigantic workload for the Ramblers, but unfortunately it just does not make matters better without him. Because I'm not going to say that Loyola would have won had he played sets 3, 4, and 5, or he was in that 5th set, because Loyola looked pretty solid without him. But it's just all about winning on the road and having that experience. And unfortunately for Loyola, that was not the case. As, honestly, Loyola just had a big gap without Parker Van Buren. Stanford had pretty much all of their veterans. And remember, this is a Stanford team that returns a majority of its players from last season and the previous season. So it was a tough loss for Loyola Chicago, as Adam Karnick pops into the chat room, host of Chi-Town Weekly, which will be going on at 7 p.m. Central Time. He says, staying safe in Texas? Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, even though it has been cold, I've been staying safe and warm. Next up, we head down to Southern California, to Orange County, to see number 3 UC Irvine taking on tied for number 19 George Mason, and this was rather amazing. So UC Irvine took the first set 25-21. It was actually tight, as George Mason was not making it easy for the Anteaters, as they actually took set 2 25-22, evening the match at 1-1. Then UC Irvine took another contested third set 25-21. The rust was incredibly real for UC Irvine, but they started to get their bearings correct as they almost took set 4, but George Mason took that fourth set 25-23, forcing a fifth. UC Irvine actually started Brett Sheward at setter, and Joe Carlos late in that fourth set took over, as Joe Carlos actually took over the rest of the way, which is kind of interesting. It's still a work in process. I'd have to ask David Niffen on what his setter experiment is looking like, but unfortunately I was not at this match. Then in the fifth set, George Mason just jumped out to an early 3-0 lead. They led 5-1. They led by as many as 8. They were up 12-4. I was just so stunned at this. I know George Mason had 3 matches underneath their belt right away, but UC Irvine just looked flat. They were just struggling to put the ball in, and George Mason just looked fresh and crisp. But UC Irvine, to their credit, they clawed back into the match as they went on an 8-2 run. They got within 2 points, trailing 14-12, but George Mason was able to clinch the match off of a kill from Jack Bowles as they upset number 3 UC Irvine. It's their first top 10 win, or not top 10 win, their first top 5 win since 2008 when it upset number 1 Penn State. George Mason was led by Jack Bowles, who had 14 kills, while Omar Hoyos added 13 kills. Liam French added 11 kills, and Sam Peters added 9 kills. The Patriots hit 221 compared to UC Irvine's 277. They did get outdug and outblocked, but they out-aced UC Irvine 10-4, and despite missing 20 serves, they were serving tough, especially in that fifth set. UC Irvine was led by Halir Heno, who had 17 kills, while Nolan Flexen, Maxim Grigoriev, and Connor Campbell each had 10 kills. And Brett Sheward, like I said, he was the setter for the most part up until toward the end of set number 4, and then Joe Carlos took over in the later stages of set 4, and then took over in set 5 altogether. Heno also added 11 digs, as no player on George Mason cracked double digits. Their highest dig leader was Troy McDonald, who had 7 digs. So it's still a little bit of a process for George Mason, but my takeaway for UC Irvine is this. This is clearly the case of them playing their first match and them being rusty and them not having an identity at the setter position. It's still just going to have to be a work in progress, as it looks like Brett Sheward is the starting setter going forward, as the Anteaters did bounce back quite nicely with a 3-set win over St. Francis, and I'll be getting into them a little bit later. But for UC Irvine, I'm not going to be too concerned about them, but they're just going to have to figure out who the setter is going to be right away before it starts to nip him in the butt big time, especially in bigger matches. As this is only the tip of the iceberg. The schedule only will get tougher from here on out, especially in Big West Conference play. Heading down to Muncie on Thursday, we had Ball State taking on UC San Diego, and long story short, the number 13 Cardinals swept number 17, the number 17 Tritons, as Patrick Rogers led the way with 14 kills, Aaron Hernandez added 12 kills, and Will McPhillips added 8 kills. Still no Tanashi Davazocheva for Ball State, as I will be going over that with Donan Cruz on Friday when I go to the First Point Collegiate Challenge. Anthony Scherfen led the Tritons with 13 kills, while Sebastian Lara added 9 kills. Ball State hit a blistering 600, and they only had 6 hitting errors. They had half the hitting errors that UC San Diego had, who hit 293. And basically, UC San Diego was outdone in pretty much every stat. They had 0 blocks on the night. They had 14 digs to Ball State's 24 digs, and they were even out-aced. The only category that the Tritons did get the better of is they had fewer service errors, but that is kind of a testament of Ball State basically digging up everything in terms of the serve receive. So my takeaway for Ball State is this: when Tanashi Davazocheva is able to get back, I think that's when they're really going to start to ramp up. But for the Tritons, this kind of goes to show that they're still in the young stages, and the growing pains were incredibly real in this match. And it could have been a whole lot worse had Tanashi played. The set scores of this match were 28-26, 25-13, and 25-20. The first set is what really killed UC San Diego. There were actually 21 ties and 7 lead changes, but the Tritons just could not take that first set. That was probably the biggest backbreaker for them, and the Cardinals just flew off with the win following set 1. But UC San Diego is also playing a very challenging non-conference schedule, so it's nothing to be ultimately ashamed of, but I will just say they're getting these big-time matches out of the way against these ranked opponents for when they actually have to face the Big West Titans, such as UC Irvine, Long Beach State, and Hawaii. Heading down to Romeoville, we have number 1 UCLA taking on Lewis, tied for number 15 Lewis, and this was a much more interesting match than I thought it was going to be. UCLA took the first set 25-23. This was also on Volleyball World's YouTube channel, so if you have YouTube, then you're basically in good shape. But then Lewis bounced back and took the second set 25-22. There were double-digit ties in every set. That's how intense this match was. And in the third set, Lewis had a few opportunities to take it. They had 2 set points, but unfortunately, they just could not take advantage of it as UCLA took that third set 28-26. Then in set 4, Lewis actually led 21-18, but UCLA said no lead is safe with us, as they took the last 7 out of 8 points winning the fourth set 25-23. And you have to feel bad for Lewis because they lost off of a missed serve when UCLA had match point. As Ethan Champlin led the Bruins with 14 kills, while Ido David and Zach Grama each had 9 kills. That's the scary thing. The scary thing is that Merrick McHenry only had 2 kills, and Alex Knight didn't even have 1 kill. But the big talk of the town in terms of UCLA via the broadcasters on the live stream, courtesy of Lewis, and was the one they call Andrew Rowan. He had 3 kills, but he had 30 assists, 6 service aces, and 7 digs. He was basically stuffing the stat sheet as Andrew Rowan is great as advertised. There's a reason why he was named I think it was the Freshman of the Year, the AVCA Freshman of the Year, and the MPSF Newcomer of the Year. For Lewis, they were led by Max Roque, who had 21 kills, while Christian Prayer added 10 digs. UCLA, despite the win, they only hit 228, while Lewis hit 273. Lewis also outdug UCLA 36-28, but the real stat that really jumps out is UCLA outblocking Lewis 15-6.5. And UCLA also had 21 service errors, but Lewis had 24. You know you did not have the greatest match when you out-service errored UCLA. You actually have to be very off in terms of your serving if you want to out-service error UCLA. And UCLA also had 14 service aces compared to Lewis's 6. So the takeaway for UCLA is this. It's a win, but this is kind of the start of their schedule really ramping up. If you all remember what I said in my weekly matches to watch for video, I basically said UCLA is starting to see an uptick in terms of the level of talent that they're facing. For Lewis, this was a missed opportunity to force a 5th set. I kind of jinxed it when I said that UCLA is going 5 sets, but I said it in a questionable manner, but unfortunately for the Bruins, they had other plans, as Lewis just had too many errors, and despite out-hitting UCLA, they have to play mistake-free volleyball. It's just one of those growing pain matches. Jumping over to Friday, we head down to Santa Barbara for number 8 Stanford taking on number 14 UC Santa Barbara, and this was another great match as advertised. Stanford took the first 2 sets 25-21 and 25-22. Even though UC Santa Barbara gave the Cardinal quite the battle, Stanford just had an answer for them, courtesy of Santa Barbara native Will Rotman. Then in set 3, the Gauchos took that one 25-20, and then in set 4, the Gauchos took that one 25-22, and suddenly it was a 5th set, even though there were 12 ties in set 4. And then in set 5, Santa Barbara jumped out to a 5-2 lead. Stanford eventually tied it up. Then they went, and when they were down 5-2, they actually went on a 7-0 run. They led 9-5, but the Gauchos came back to tie it up at 9-9, and eventually it was just back and forth from there on out. Stanford had 1 match point, couldn't convert it, as I want to say it was a missed serve. Then Stanford eventually converted it, courtesy of Will Rotman on their 2nd match point, and that is how Stanford outlasted the Gauchos. Will Rotman did lead the way with 22 kills, while Nathaniel Gates added 8 kills, as well as Kevin Lamp and Moses Wagner. Ethan Hill chipped in 6 kills, and I was that day years old when I found out that Teo Snooey is how it's pronounced. It's not Theo Snowy, it's Teo Snooey. So my apologies if I've been mispronouncing that name. I feel disappointed in myself, but what can you do? So Luke Turner is the libero for the Cardinal, as he had 12 digs, but Nathan Litsky added 16 digs to go along with his 51 assists and 3 service aces. The Gauchos were led by Jess Bianchi, who had 17 kills, while Patrick Kane, no, not the hockey player, Patrick Kane added 10 kills. And then Josh Aruya chipped in 8 kills, and Owen Berg had 6 kills. Jack Walmer chipped in 10 digs to go along with his 41 assists, and then Bianchi added 3 service aces. So my takeaway for the Gauchos is this. This is one of those matches where they missed a golden opportunity to really assert themselves. I know they have a young team, but unfortunately, the Gauchos just could not handle the Santa Barbara native that was Will Rotman. And it was a great match. The fact that Santa Barbara came back from 2 sets down to force the fifth, and they led for a good chunk of that fifth set is quite phenomenal. But you have to learn to close on your home floor, because if you don't, you're going to struggle against the top-tier competition, such as UC Irvine or Long Beach State or Hawaii. And Adam Karnick, who's also the host of The Neutral Zone, also adds, I was going to say, when did Patrick Kane start playing volleyball? And I had to basically look back at that as well. I was like, Patrick Kane? I'm like, oh my goodness. And then it's the same spelling. It's Patrick and then Kane. So there you have it. Jumping over to Saturday and heading to Columbus, we had UC San Diego taking on number 5 Ball State, number 17 Tritons trying to get a signature win. They won the first set 26-14, but then Ohio State responded by taking that set 25-20. Then in set 3, another barn burner, but it went the Tritons' way as they took it 25-21, and it was looking like the Tritons were going to pull off the upset. But Ohio State brought out the belt and kind of smacked the Tritons around as they took set 4 25-11. Then in set 5, Ohio State pretty much was in control of that set. Only one tie, as despite it being close, the Buckeyes won that fifth set 15-11, winning the match as Ohio State avoided the upset. But another thing is they had another slow start in their first set. This is the third time they've had a slow start in set 1, as they had one against Damon. They also had one against St. Francis. So Ohio State, my takeaway for them is they have to clean up their first sets, because if they take that first set, they don't even need to go 4 or 5. As the Buckeyes were led by Jacob Pasteur, who had 20 kills. Shane Wetzel added 19 kills. Cole Young added 12 kills. The Buckeyes hit 270 as, even though they were outblocked, they almost doubled up UC San Diego in digs, 51-26, as Thomas Poole added 17 digs and Pasteur added 10 digs. The Buckeyes also out-aced the Tritons 9-4, and they both had 18 service errors. You're going to see a lot more service errors in the men's volleyball aspect of things as opposed to the women's. The Tritons were led by Matthew Lim, who had 13 kills, while Anthony Scherfin had 12 kills. My takeaway for the Tritons is this. This was a good step in the right direction for the Tritons. They played at Covalli Center, 1,250 in attendance. They almost pulled off an amazing upset. Unfortunately, this is just the reality of them having such a young team. But they looked so much better in this match as opposed to Ball State. So there is some bright spots for the Tritons, but it's all about finding who's going to be that it guy, who's going to be the new Ryan Kaw, who's going to be that number 1 guy. Ohio State has those bases loaded, as basically they just had everyone get a hand in it. Get a hand in the offense. They had 68 kills compared to UC San Diego's 39, so that kind of says a lot. But overall, a great match from both teams, but the Buckeyes were able to come away with the win. Heading down to the Windy City, we have another Loyola Chicago matchup. This time they took on number 1 UCLA, and they honored their national champion team from 2014. And John Hawks got to face UCLA for the first time as a head coach, but UCLA decided to play spoiler as the Bruins swept the number 10 Ramblers 25-20, 25-19, and 25-21. The Bruins were led by Ito David, who had 12 kills, while Cooper Robinson added 10 kills. Ethan Champlin had 9 kills. And my takeaway for UCLA is this. When they have other players stepping up, that's when UCLA can get really scary. That's when they can get really good, because I didn't even know who Cooper Robinson was until I saw his name on the roster. But for UCLA, this just proves that they're not going to be all about Alex Knight or Ethan Champlin. They've got other guys that could step up. And I know it's still early for them, but you have to wonder what they might be doing at libero, as everyone that played actually registered one kill, which is pretty funny if you ask me. So all in all, for UCLA, they really performed well. UCLA is still in the experiment of who's going to be the libero, but I think it's still going good because they actually just played 7 guys, which is quite funny. So the fact that they were able to have that is quite nice. For Loyola, they were led by Parker Van Buren and Jake Reed, who both had 8 kills. Great to see Parker Van Buren was feeling better. I guess he might have tweaked something against Stanford, and he wasn't 100%. Daniel Fabakovic added 7 kills, as Loyola only hit 128. And my takeaway for the Ramblers is this. I get they're facing top 10 opponents, but eventually they're going to need to step up if they want to be a paragon in the MIVA. There's a reason why Loyola was chosen to finish second in the MIVA behind Ohio State. And while it is early and the schedule will eventually lighten up for the Ramblers, I just feel that Loyola is still in the stages of they're still trying to work the kinks out. Yes, I know they beat Hawaii, but I feel that might have been Hawaii having more growing pains as opposed to Loyola just being themselves. And I get it, they're a top 10 team with only 1 win, but still, they are basically having quite the tough start to the season, but these matches will eventually toughen them up for MIVA play and for any other tough opponent they take on. Next up, we have round 2 between the Gauchos and the Cardinal as we circle back to Santa Barbara. And this matchup was not like the previous one. Stanford took the first set 25-22. Then the Gauchos took the second set 26-24. Then the Cardinal took the third set 25-23 in narrow fashion despite not trailing. And then the Cardinal took set 4 25-21 as Stanford remained undefeated on the season. They were led by the Santa Barbara native Will Rotman, who had 16 kills. Moses Wagner added 15 kills. Alex Rotman, Will Rotman's little brother, added 11 kills. And Stanford as a whole hit 325. They also outdug the Gauchos 46-37. They outblocked the Gauchos 14-5, and they barely out-aced them and barely out-service errored them. So for Stanford, there's a reason why they were top 10. They were ranked top 10, and there's a reason why I'm very high and encouraging on the Cardinal. I really think Stanford is a legit team, and they are probably maybe a dark horse to win the national championship, but if you're taking on Stanford, you never want to underestimate them. They're a very solid team. John Costi is a fantastic coach. Their coaching staff really prepared them on the road. And for Stanford, this is a big win, getting 2 wins on the road, especially since you're so far from Northern California for the most part. And I almost want to give Stanford my team of the week, but I gave it to George Mason after they pulled off an amazing upset over UC Irvine. But Stanford was a close second in terms of giving team of the week to. For the Gauchos, they were led by Jest Bianchi, who had 21 kills, while Ben Court added 11 kills. Patrick Kane had 8 kills. Josh Ruya had 7 kills. My takeaway for the Gauchos is they're still in the stages of young and inexperienced, as Ben Court and Kane each had 10 kills, or 10 digs, and then Wagner added 10 digs, and Nathan Litsky added 16 digs to go along with 40 assists. But back to the Gauchos, this is still one of those young growing pain matches. They had that in the match against GCU. They had them against the first matchup against Stanford, where they unfortunately could not close, and they had them in this matchup against Stanford. And losing the third set was really what killed them. Even though Stanford had pretty much firm control in that set, also losing the first set in close fashion really hurt them as well. And Santa Barbara is just going to have to learn to roll with the punches and work a little harder. They have a young team, I understand, but honestly, it's eventually going to have to be make or break when it comes to Big West Conference time, because they don't want to go into Big West Conference still trying to figure things out, because that's not the goal at that point. The goal at conference play is they have to have everything figured out, and they have to basically know who their it guy is, basically who Ryan Wilcox is from last year, and who's going to lead the charge, and which freshman is going to step up. It looks like they have their it guy in Jest Bianchi, but who's going to be the Robin to Bianchi's Batman? Next up, we have UC Irvine taking on Princeton. This was a matchup I personally was excited for as the Anteaters and Princeton squared off against one another, and if I was not in Texas, I would have totally gone to this match just because former set point guest Sam Schweisky, and unfortunately that was not the case. But for the match, Princeton took the opening set 25-20. They looked pretty comfortable in that first set. But let's just say this was a match full of runs as UC Irvine rebounded nicely in set 2. They took it 25-17, and they took the third set 25-19 and the fourth set 25-18 to win the match. Like I said, there were no lead changes, so whenever a team jumped out to the early lead, they weren't giving it up. And there were only 3 ties in this match, and 1 in set 1 and 2 in set 2. As the Anteaters were led by Nolan Flexen, who had 20 digs. Hilir Hano also had 20 kills. Hilir Hano had 11 kills, and Connor Campbell had 7 kills. UC Irvine had a hitting percentage of .390, holding Princeton to only .208. There were no such thing as digs, as both teams only combined for 29 digs, as Irvine had 17 and Princeton had 12. Blocks, on the other hand, were a whole different story, as UC Irvine had 11.5 blocks compared to Princeton's 12. And both teams were very high on service aces, as Irvine had 13 service aces to 18 service errors, and Princeton had 10 service aces to 13 service errors. Princeton was led by Nairo Omene, who had 11 kills, while Ryan Venna had 9 kills. Ben Harrington only had 7 kills, and he hit in the negatives. My takeaway for Princeton is this: when Ben Harrington has that off of a night, they're in for a long match. But it's good to see other players stepping up. Ryan Venna is only a sophomore, and Nairo Omene is, I think he's a senior. I want to say he's a senior, but Princeton just cannot rely on Ben Harrington each and every night. They need to have other players step up. But it's good they got that out of the way. The problem was they're on the road. They're in Crawford Hall. UC Irvine had an iffy week going into that match, having lost George Mason, another team in the EIVA, and then sweeping St. Francis. Not in the dominant fashion, but in the fashion of it was good enough to win in 3. For UC Irvine, my takeaway for them is they have found the Robin to Hilir Hano's Batman. Nolan Flexen was phenomenal, and having 20 kills and hitting .667, that's going to get the job done. It's not just going to be the Hilir Hano show or the Connor Campbell show or the Maxim Grigoriev's show. It's going to be all of those players stepping up, and Hilir Hano stepping up was definitely massive for the Anteaters, and they're going to need all those players stepping up if they want to win, just because if they don't, it's going to be a rough ride for the Anteaters. So, all in all, for the Anteaters, I thought they played solid, and the fact that they were able to basically not trail in any of the sets they were ahead in is quite nice. And this was one of those sneaky good matches. Everyone probably overlooks Princeton just because they're not on the level of Penn State or anyone else, but Princeton is such an underrated team. Sam Schweisky does an outstanding job with his program, and the fact that they are always in the thick of it when it comes to the EIVA or they're winning it is a testament to his amazing coaching philosophy and whatnot. And Princeton definitely gets the most out of their guys, and I think Princeton can maybe challenge Penn State. I'm not going to say that Princeton's going to win the EIVA, but if Princeton can play like they did in set 1, I really like their chances in the EIVA. And the good news is for Princeton is that they actually had themselves a historical moment. They actually had a career high for one of their players. Ben Harrington notched 13 service aces in Princeton's season opener, and his previous career high was at 7, so there's a lot more to come from. In addition, Ben Harrington's 13 service aces were actually the most in NCAA men's volleyball history, so Princeton's Ben Harrington definitely made a lot of history and then some, as I still can't believe Ben Harrington was not an All-American last year. I get it, Princeton didn't make the NCAA tournament, but Ben Harrington was probably the man on the mission, and I really can't wait to see what he can do for Princeton in what could be his final year. And then the last matchup to go over is another big upset, It was tied for number 15 Lewis taking on number 9 BYU, and this was taking place in Romeoville. Lewis surprisingly got the jump in this match as they took the first set 25-16, and that was quite the first set. The second set, Lewis took that 25-23 in a little bit closer fashion, so suddenly Lewis was up 2-0 on the number 9 team. And this was something I was a little bit concerned about when BYU played Lewis. And I forgot to mention BYU had to go 5 with Loyola. I'll get into that in a little bit, but BYU did unfortunately find their second wind as they took set 3 25-16, and they took set 4 25-11. So suddenly BYU was finally rejuvenated and they were revived. But in set number 5, Lewis was able to hold on and take the win, winning set 5 15-13 as they had 11 ties and 3 lead changes in that set. Lewis was led by Daniel Haber, who had 15 kills, while Christian Prayer added 14 kills, Max Roquet added 10 kills. Lewis only hit 207, while BYU hit 274, but Lewis did outdig Lewis by 3. And both teams had 9 service aces. Lewis had 3 more service errors than BYU, and they were outblocked by 2. The Cougars were led by Trent Moser, who had 14 kills, while Mix Romanus added 10 kills, and Gavin Julian chipped in 8 kills. My takeaway for Lewis is this: they have arrived. Lewis, after going 5 with Penn State and narrowly losing out against them, and then losing to UCLA in 4, where they almost forced a 5th set, paid off. This was an amazing win for Lewis. It's probably the start of something special for the Flyers. I really think that Lewis can definitely do some damage, and I really like Lewis this year. They returned a majority of their players. The problem is that they did not have one conference first-teamer, and they didn't have one All-American. That was the big Achilles heel, and that was my big concern for Lewis. But they looked solid, and through those 3 ranked matches, I think Lewis can actually do some damage in the MIVA, and that's big right there because the MIVA is so competitive. It's not just Ohio State, Ball State, and Loyola. It's Lewis, they're pretty good. Lindenwood was pretty good last week, even though they lost twice to GCU. Purdue Fort Wayne is definitely great with John Dydridge, even though they lost a 5-setter against NJIT. McKendree, you never know what they can pull off. So the MIVA is so competitive. You never want to underestimate anybody at any time. But going to BYU, and my takeaway for them, this was definitely unexpected from the Cougars. But as I mentioned, the Cougars kind of struggle outside of Smith Fieldhouse. Yes, they have some good matches on the road, and they did beat Loyola on the road in 5 sets. But here's the thing for BYU. They have to learn to win on the road. They have to actually win not at home. They have to learn to win outside of Smith Fieldhouse. But for BYU, it's still early in the season, but this loss kind of puts a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But it doesn't take away from their 5-set win over Loyola on the road. And this was basically on Thursday as BYU wound up winning 19-25, 26-24, 25-27, 25-22, and 15-13. The 5th set was very tight, as it could have gone either way, as BYU jumped out to an early lead, and then Loyola came back, and then it was just a massive tug of war, as neither team didn't really have a clear breakaway until BYU when they crossed 10 points, or following the 10-10 tie. As BYU was led by Luke Benson, who had 21 kills. Capono Brown had 13 kills. Tion Taylor added 8 kills. And surprisingly, Mix Romanus only played 1 set, but he had 4 kills. So don't know if it was anything injury related. But honestly, that was a very good win for BYU. It was impressive. And you would think with Loyola having played 4 previous matches against top 10 opponents, they would probably be ready for the Cougars, but unfortunately they weren't. Parker Van Buren had 19 kills for Loyola, while Daniel Fabakovic added 19 kills. Jake Reed had 9 kills. Loyola hit 295 compared to BYU's very close 294. And BYU outdug Loyola 47-34, as leading them in that department was Bernardo Adam, who had 15 digs, while Noah Hain added 14 digs to go along with 50 assists. So it was a great match overall, and for BYU, that was a great win. They kind of erased the narrative of they could win on the road outside of Smith Fieldhouse, but that loss to Lewis kind of makes me wonder, can they really win against other talented teams? Fortunately for them, they do have most of their big-time matches at Smith Fieldhouse, like UCLA and GCU and UC Irvine. So they have the chance to really prove themselves this season. But for Sean Olmstead and his team, it's just another one of those learning process weeks. And then there were some other notable matches that happened this week. We had Long Beach State winning twice this past week. They took down LIU in straight sets, and then they had to go 4 with St. Francis. They took the first 2 sets, lost the third, and then dominated in the fourth. So that's just going to be one of those matches where St. Francis is still sneaky good, and they are one of the favorites to win the NEC. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. But overall, it was a pretty solid week in terms of NCAA men's volleyball. We had 2 massive upsets. I didn't even expect Lewis to come out blazing and then unfortunately cool off and then narrowly hold on. But it was a great win for Lewis. It was kind of a statement win for the Flyers, as I'm starting to like them a little bit more in MIVA play. So keep an eye on them. And that's pretty much going to do it for Week 2's notable matches from that week. So let's jump on into the AVCA Top 20. As the AVCA/NVA National Collegiate Men's Volleyball Poll. I still don't like it how they don't call it NCAA Men's Volleyball Poll. But 20 through 16 consists of Charleston at 20, CSUN and UC San Diego tied at 18, George Mason at 17, and Princeton at 16. 15 through 11 consists of UC Santa Barbara at 15, Ball State at 14, USC at 13, Lewis at 12, and Loyola at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Pepperdine at 10, BYU at 9, Stanford at 8, Penn State at 7, and UC Irvine at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Grand Canyon at 5, Ohio State at 4, Hawaii at 3, Long Beach State at 2, and your still number 1 team who garnered all the first place votes is UCLA. So again, it was business as usual for the Bruins. Long Beach State obviously looked good. Hawaii, I forgot to mention, one of their players broke the service ace record. And let me tell you, that first match, they beat Emmanuel twice, but let me just tell you, it was quite the barn burner for it being a 3-set win. And let's just say Hawaii just muscled their way, and there's a reason why Hawaii is in the top 3, which they'll probably improve, but I will say one thing that was totally notable for Hawaii is that one of their players broke a service ace record. I want to say it was for Hawaii. It certainly wasn't for the entirety of the match. But the first match between Emmanuel and Hawaii, the Emmanuel libero unfortunately got drilled twice off of some hard-hitting kills, and it was Nick Eichenberger. And I got to give him respect. The fact that he took 2 smashing kills in the first set to the face is a testament to how tough he is. And liberos are just a different breed. And I know Emmanuel lost that one, but it is what it is. And it was actually the second match that one of Hawaii's players broke the service ace record in terms of not only their career high, but I want to say the team record at Hawaii. And that player was Louis Sakanoko, who had 9 service aces. He also had 8 kills, which is quite nice. So this was kind of one of those matches where Hawaii was starting to get in some of its young guns, just because they kind of know how really good they are compared to Emmanuel. And that's no disrespect to Emmanuel, but the thing is for the entire Conference of Carolinas is that Hawaii is 12-0 all-time against the Conference of Carolinas, or any team from the Conference of Carolinas. And 11 of those 12 wins were 3-0 wins. So I'm just going to say Hawaii is kind of a cut above the rest in terms of the Conference of Carolinas. And honestly, it's no disrespect to that conference, but Hawaii is just that good. They have the great coach in Charlie Wade. They also have very talented players, and they didn't even need to unleash all of their players. I want to say it was just after the first set, Hawaii just took out the starters and played the reserves just to give them some experience. But all in all for Hawaii, they just looked very solid. And the Rainbow Warriors, they lost that one game against Loyola, but they bounced back in a big way. And then USC and Pepperdine are also undefeated. USC I'll be seeing, Ohio State I'll be seeing, UCLA I'll be seeing, Stanford I'll be seeing. Those 4 teams that I just mentioned, they're all undefeated. Penn State is also undefeated. The only undefeated team that's not partaking in the First Point Collegiate Challenge is Ball State, but they've had some ups and downs, especially without Tanashi Davazocheva. So for Ball State, I'm sure they can turn it around. I'm excited to see those 6 teams that I just mentioned in the First Point Collegiate Challenge later on in the week. That's going to be on Friday and Saturday, January 19th and 20th at the Austin Convention Center. If you haven't got your tickets, definitely get them now. All right, but that's going to do it for the NCAA Men's Volleyball Week 2 and AVCA/NVA Coaches Poll. We're going to take ourselves a quick break. When we come back, we've got some NCAA Women's Volleyball transfer news to go over, and we have the Week 3 matches to watch for. Keep it locked here. You're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No, not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide for your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, enjoy hearing amazing sports stories, and respect all sports because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on the defining moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows, especially Chi-Town Weekly, which will be going on at 7 p.m. Central Time, which is approximately 2 hours from now. But let's get on into the second half of Set Point. So I forgot to mention last week the Off the Block media poll. So Off the Block is basically a website which grows the game of NCAA men's volleyball, just because, in my opinion, and I think everyone else can agree, the NCAA men's volleyball game doesn't get as much exposure and as much promotion as NCAA women's volleyball. And I think that's rather sad. But Off the Block is basically a website that covers all things volleyball, whether it's like Division 1-2 or National Collegiate Volleyball, Division 3, and whatnot. So honestly, it's a great website to cover, and Vinny Lopes does an outstanding job. And he also invited me last year to vote for the top 10 in their media poll. So the top 10 goes as follows. And you might have seen on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Instagram, but here's the top 10. So 10 through 6 consist of Loyola at 10, Stanford at 9, BYU at 8, Penn State at 7, and UC Irvine at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Ohio State at 5, Grand Canyon 4, Hawaii 3, Long Beach State 2, and UCLA number 1. Receiving votes were UC Santa Barbara with 4, Pepperdine with 1, and Princeton with 1. Before I continue, Ralph Calise is in the chat room. He tells me to have a great show. Thank you, Ralph. So my ballot from last week was nowhere near that. I was a little surprised at what I saw in terms of my poll. So I don't know if any of y'all care on what I voted for, just because, well, I have my opinion and everyone else has theirs. But honestly, the teams that I voted for in the top 10 were Stanford 10, Loyola 9, BYU 8, Penn State 7, Grand Canyon 6, Ohio State 5, Hawaii 4, UC Irvine 3, Long Beach State 2, and UCLA 1. So I get it why I don't understand why UC Irvine was shown to number 6. They're a talented team, and yes, they didn't start the week off that week, but it's probably for good reason, and probably because the East Coast teams take a week to travel down. I mean, Long Beach State didn't get penalized for basically traveling. So I voted Hawaii at 4 just because, well, for starters, Hawaii did lose to Loyola Chicago, and I feel they had those growing pains. Like I said, they had that match, they had won, but unfortunately they just kind of released the grasp of their lead, especially late in that 5th set. Nothing against Hawaii, it's still early in the season, but it's still an unfortunate loss for them. And I only put them at number 4. Some might have said I could have put them at like 6 or below, but honestly, they won the first meeting against Loyola. There's no need to put them anywhere below number 3. And it's still early in the season. And then there were some other things that kind of took into consideration. Ohio State had to go 4 with Damon, which is a team that's unfortunately not going to get considered into the off-the-block top 10. But it is what it is. And then Grand Canyon lost a set to UC Santa Barbara. Then Penn State had to go 5 with Lewis, which is not in the top 10, let alone didn't even receive a vote. So that was kind of my thought process. And I flipped Loyola Stanford just because, well, Stanford beat a Loyola team that was playing its backups. Now, I understand considering Loyola below Stanford, but you have to remember, if you're not beating a team with that's not your best, it doesn't really have too much significance. And maybe it's because Stanford had been playing, or not Stanford, Loyola had been playing a lot of matches in 1 week. Remember, they had played 3 matches in the span of 5 days. They played on Wednesday, then Friday, then Sunday. So they haven't had much time to rest or practice a whole lot. But for Loyola, I kind of put them at number 9 instead of 10. Now, if Stanford had beaten Loyola and Loyola played their starters, that would have been understandable, and then I could have put Stanford at number 9. But I decided to go the other route and put Stanford at 10 for the time being until they beat Loyola, which would have been a quality opponent, or beat a opponent that was quality opponent like altogether. But that was basically last week's Off the Block Coaches Poll. The Off the Block Media Poll is released every Tuesday, and sorry about that. It's released every Tuesday, and there are Off the Block voters that are basically volleyball media. I'm not trying to say that I'm volleyball media, but soon. This is a good step in the right direction. So I'm one of the voters. Vinny Lopes, the founder of Off the Block, is one of the voters. Jonathan Bates, aka MPSF Bias, who's a reporter / editor for Off the Block, he votes. Brandon Johnson, contributor to Off the Block, he votes. And then you have other volleyball media members, such as Rob Aspero, who's a volleyball PA announcer, and he does broadcasting for UC Irvine men's and women's volleyball, and does broadcast for everything volleyball. TJ Breschers, the founder of the Bella Report, which is a very useful tool for NCAA men's volleyball. Anne-Marie Anderson, volleyball play-by-play announcer for the Pac-12, and basically play-by-play announcer or color commentary analyst for the Pac-12 entirely. Ray Gooden, former NIU, Northern Illinois women's volleyball coach, and Loyola men's and women's volleyball play-by-play announcer. You have Aaron Johnson, the MIVA sports information director. Sean Walker, a reporter in Utah who covers all things BYU. Rob DeMello, who is a Hawaii sportscaster / reporter. Ted Wang, who's a volleyball enthusiast. That's all I could really get from him. Tim Schwartz, the play-by-play guy for Stanford. Gordon Brunskill, the EIVA SID. Corey Ginn, the Assistant Athletic Director of Communications at Queen's University in North Carolina. And then you also have Tiff Wells, who I'm personally friends with, as he is the Hawaii men's and women's volleyball play-by-play announcer for ESPN Honolulu / CBS 1500. And I want to say that's it. There might be a couple others, but I want to say that's it for the time being. I hope I'm not giving away too much information, but I've seen other volleyball shows kind of do that in terms of other media polls, but that's just me. Don't judge anyone based off of who they vote for and who basically they get in terms of votes, in terms of the Off the Block Media poll. But all in all, that's kind of it for the Off the Block Media poll from last week. Going into this week, my top 10 this week includes Lewis at 10, BYU at 9, UC Irvine at 8, Stanford at 7, Penn State at 6, Ohio State at 5, Grand Canyon at 4, Hawaii at 3, Long Beach State at 2, and UCLA at number 1. So I took out Lewis just because, or I put in Lewis and took out Loyola just because Loyola, other than the Hawaii win, they don't really have anything of too significance. They're 1-5, and they haven't proved themselves against one of the top-ranked competition. They will get back into that top 10 as they're basically knocking on the door of being in the Off the Block top 10. And Lewis, I think, definitely deserves it because beating BYU is no easy feat. Heck, I can even consider Lewis being at number 9 since Lewis just registered its first big win, and their only losses were to UCLA and Penn State, which Penn State they pushed to 5 on the road, and then UCLA they pushed to 4 at home. So I think Lewis is deserving of the top 10, in my opinion, in the off-the-block ballot, but that's just me. We'll see what happens tomorrow, so we will see what happens in terms of the off-the-block media poll, and it gets released every Tuesday, like I mentioned, and those are my votes. All right, jumping over to some NCAA women's volleyball news and notable transfers. So, in terms of the notable transfers and notable news, the Anna Dodson is back for one more year for UCLA's women's volleyball team, and that is big news for the Bruins, and I can't wait to see what she'll do. I definitely think she is a key contributor and a key player for the Bruins. She has a lot of veteran experience, and I'm definitely certain that Alfie Reft is basically happy and breathing a major sigh of relief that he's getting Anna Dodson back. Or should I say, the Anna Dodson. So in terms of some of the other notable transfers, we have Sydney Reed transferring from Wisconsin to West Virginia. She is a libero and she's a grad student. That's kind of a good get for West Virginia. She now joins the Greenies, Jen Greeny and Burdette Greeny, as she transfers from Wisconsin to West Virginia, which obviously you're still going to be in the Big 12, but it's not going to be as competitive as the Big 10. I'm not trying to say that the Big 12 stinks, but the Big 12 with Texas leaving is basically going to be a little bit more awkward. But for Sydney Reed, I think this is definitely a good place to get your bearings and challenge your way to the libero position. I would not be surprised if she was the libero for next year. Staying within the Southwest area or the Southwestern area, we have Emily Hellmuth transferring from Pepperdine to Texas A&M. So this makes all the more sense just because I've seen her play. She's pretty solid. Unfortunately, she was down the depth chart at Pepperdine. She's a junior outside hitter, and she is from Texas. She's from Dallas, Texas, and she will be going to Texas A&M. And I think it's kind of huge just because she's going to be by family, albeit it's not going to be as close. But honestly, I really think that this is a huge thing for Emily Hellmuth heading back home. So I'm definitely excited to see what she'll do for Texas A&M, who had a very solid season last year, make it to the NCAA tournament and taking a set off of Texas in the NCAA tournament. But that wasn't the only player they got from the transfer portal. They actually got Maddie Walk from LSU, as she's staying in SEC country, and she'll be transferring from LSU to Texas A&M. And she has 2 more years of eligibility left. She's a junior setter, and that's pretty good right there. Getting Maddie Walk is so big, and I don't know what Jamie Morrison wants to do with his team in terms of 6'2 offenses or 5'1 offenses, but having Maddie Walk is so big. She was kind of the key setter for LSU, and then with her transferring to Texas A&M, I think she can really do a lot of work for the Aggies, especially since she'll be playing LSU at least one time. Jumping over to Big Ten country, we have Jordan Hopp, a grad student middle blocker, transferred from Iowa State to Penn State. So she was third on the team, third on Iowa State in kills with 199. She was first in blocks with 104. And the middle blocker room is looking very promising. It's not just going to be Jordan Hopp. It's going to be other players. As they got one, I think they got one player from Nebraska and another. They still have one player coming back. I want to say it's like Maddie Trammell, I want to say. All I know is that her last name is Trammell, but Penn State is looking very, very good in terms of their team for next season. I'm really going to be excited to see what the Nittany Lions can do, and Katie Schumacher-Cawley is building something with the Nittany Lions. And speaking of Big Ten country, Layla Blackwell, a grad student middle blocker, is transferring from San Diego to Nebraska. That is even bigger because Nebraska gets a very talented middle blocker, and she actually, if you all read my tweet or my post on X, I said she's heading back to Big Ten country as she transfers to Nebraska from San Diego. So the reason I said back to Big Ten country is she actually started at Indiana, and then she basically transferred to San Diego, and now she is back in Big Ten country playing for Nebraska, and that is big time right there just because I really think that makes Nebraska even better. I think that Nebraska is going to get so much better next year with not only experience, but they also have players that are basically returning from last year's team. And they're all young players. They're like freshmen and juniors and seniors that are going to be grad students. So all in all for Nebraska, the rich are getting richer, and they're improving in the middle quite a bit. So watch out for those Huskers. And then one more setter I have to go over, and one more player to go over that's notable, is Marina Crownover, who transfers from Texas to Missouri. So this is an interesting transfer. So she is heading to SEC country as she transfers from Missouri to Texas. And I kind of mentioned she would have stayed in SEC country anyway because she would have stayed at Texas had she stayed, but she isn't. So the Tigers, this is kind of a good get, but this makes me wonder. They have Sierra Dudley, who had a phenomenal freshman year returning. So who would be the starter? Keep in mind Marina Crownover is a redshirt sophomore setter who basically has some championship pedigree to her, albeit that she didn't play too much, but I did get to see her a few times. So all in all for Marina Crownover, I'm kind of excited to see what this happens for Don Sullivan's team, and this is basically the Don Sullivan effect. So I'm basically interested to see what this is going to be, whether it's going to be a 6-2 offense or a 5-1 offense. We'll see what happens with Marina Crownover and her being at Missouri. And I also have to basically go over this little bit of nugget news right there. So with Layla Blackwell transferring to Nebraska, this will be the first time that John Cook will have had three transfers on its roster. And the previous 20 times, or previous 19 times, he had at no more than 2, but at least 1. So that was big that's big right there, but it also shows that Nebraska is becoming a hotbed for volleyball. It's already a hotbed with all of its other volleyball teams. So I really look forward to seeing what Nebraska can do, because remember, they had Merritt Beeson, who comes back. She was a captain from last year. Taylor Lanfear transfers from Minnesota, and Layla Blackwell is transferring from San Diego. So that's 3 transfers, and once again, it'll be the first time that John Cook has 3 or more transfers in his tenure. And it continues the whole, he has at least 1 transfer from 20 seasons for the last 20 years, going into this year. So that's pretty much that for the NCAA women's volleyball transfer news right there, and notable news right there all in general. Gotta give a shout out to Lincoln Arneal, who is the reporter for Nebraska volleyball. He does a great job covering Nebraska volleyball, and he is also the co-host of his volleyball podcast called the Volleyball State Pod. Have to give him a little plug, by the way. And he also tweets, and he also has national stories, and he votes for Volleyball Magazine, which has its own voting poll for NCAA women's volleyball. So there you have it right there. Definitely do give him a follow, especially if you're a Nebraska fan. He definitely has a lot of insight for Nebraska volleyball. So there you go. That's it for the plug. All right, but that's that for NCAA women's volleyball altogether. Now let's jump on into NCAA men's volleyball week number 3, and then I'll let you all go. So week 3 is going to be an eventful week. Why? Because we have the First Point Collegiate Challenge, which I think is going to be awesome. But there are other notable matches to watch for. So before we get the First Point Collegiate Challenge matches out of the way, we got to start off with the other matches to watch for. Starting off on Tuesday, we have number 16 Princeton tied for number 18 UC San Diego. All right, Princeton versus UC San Diego. This is going to be a nice little matchup just because Princeton needs its little get-right game against a ranked opponent, as they unfortunately missed out on a good chance of staying undefeated and taking down UC Irvine. But for UC San Diego, it's another challenging game as they have not won against a ranked opponent. If they're going to beat an opponent that's ranked, Princeton would be the team. However, Princeton is just so good, and Ben Harrington is not going to have the night he had against UC Irvine. I don't think he's going to have another 13-service ace match, but I definitely think that Ben Harrington is going to be on his you-know-what. And then you also have Ryan Venna and Naihiro Omene, as he's also stepping up. He's kind of the he's kind of the Robin to Ben Harrington's Batman. So I think that Princeton is definitely a good watch for, and this is kind of the match to watch for, as they're on the West Coast trip, and it continues on into next week. I mean, I guess if you want to include BYU as well, since they're on Mountain Standard Time. But Princeton is wrapping up its California road trip, as last week they were on the road against UC Irvine to start the road trip, and then they have UC San Diego tomorrow as of this recording. And then we jump on over to Friday. It's a little quiet week outside of the First Point Invitational, as Princeton heads down to Northridge to take on tied for number 18 CSUN. So once again, it's another one of those tricky matchups for Princeton. I could see them winning, but you never want to count out CSUN. I really think CSUN is a talented team. They're much better than what most people give them credit for. They returned most of their players. They didn't lose anyone big time. And Theo Edwards, I want to say. Theo Edwards does an outstanding job with his team. This is only his second year, so I really look forward to seeing what CSUN can do. It's another one of those talented, underrated, ranked-on-ranked matchups, so do not underestimate them. So I really think that CSUN is a sneaky good opponent, and this is a sneaky good match, but I would expect Princeton to come out on top. But don't count out CSUN. Also on Friday, we have tied for number 18 UC San Diego hosting number 5 GCU. All right, this is going to be a little bit more one-sided of a matchup, just because GCU is playing some of its best volleyball, albeit they did struggle a little bit against Lindenwood, but they won both those matches. They beat UC Santa Barbara, and they also beat UC San Diego and CSUN in the Santa Barbara tournament, or the A6 Invitational. But for GCU, this is kind of another one of those get-right games where they need to prove that they are still a top 5 team. They definitely are a top 5 team, in my opinion. I think for UC San Diego, this is just going to be another one of those tough ranked matches, just because, well, for starters, UC San Diego has a young team, and I've been mentioning this quite a bit. UC San Diego needs all the experienced games that they can get, because if they don't, they're going to basically struggle in Big West Conference play. So we'll see what happens with the Tritons taking on the Lopes. I imagine the Lopes are going to win, but don't count out Brad Rostradder's team. Then on Friday, heading down to Newark, New Jersey, we have number 17 George Mason taking on number 2 Long Beach State. This will be played at NJIT, as, like I mentioned, it's going to be in Newark, New Jersey. It's kind of the NJIT Invitational, as George Mason, for starters, coming off of a big win against UC Irvine, they're now taking on a much more talented opponent in Long Beach State. And unlike UC Irvine, who kicked off its season, Long Beach State has a couple matches underneath their belt. Now, George Mason is playing its 5th Big West Conference foe in a row, as now they kind of get the big chungus of the conference in Long Beach State. I really think that George Mason has a shot at beating Long Beach State, but Long Beach State has so many returners in terms of its All-Americans, All-Conference players. But don't be surprised if Jay Hosek does find a way to prepare his boys really well and have his team ready to go, especially since they don't have to travel all that much, as they're only traveling from Fairfax to New Jersey, where Long Beach State has to travel from all the way across the country over to Jersey. I also got to make note that NJIT pulled off 2 big wins last week. Like I mentioned, they beat Purdue Fort Wayne, and that was probably their signature-ish win. I thought beating Purdue Fort Wayne was huge, especially at home. So don't sleep on NJIT, who takes on Long Beach State the day after. I only kind of wonder this. Why would you put your alumni weekend on against a team that is in the top 3? But I don't know. I'm not Danny Goncalves, or I'm not NJIT or whatnot. So lastly, to close out the other matches outside of the First Point Collegiate Challenge, we have number 9 BYU at number 15 UC Santa Barbara. All right, this is going to be a fun little matchup right here. So UC Santa Barbara obviously missed the bus in terms of an upset, at least one, against Stanford. Now they get BYU. Now for BYU, I wouldn't be surprised if they struggled against the Gauchos, just because playing in Robb Gymnasium is so tough. It's not like playing at the Pyramid or Smithfield House or Pauley Pavilion or Galen Center. it's a little bit more crammed than it is. It's like playing in a small gym, and that's nothing against UC Santa Barbara. I don't know why they don't have the Thunderdome, but oh well. But for Santa Barbara, this would be a great match to win in, especially since they're getting BYU off of a loss against Lewis. I really think that BYU definitely needs a little bit of a tune-up game, a little bit of a get-right game, a little bit of a bounce-back game, but they just can't underestimate UC Santa Barbara. That's a young team over there in Santa Barbara, but they're really starting to learn very quick. They took GCU to 4, they took Stanford to 5 in one match, and they took Stanford to 4 in one match. So all in all, don't be surprised if Santa Barbara beats BYU, but if BYU wins twice on the road and on consecutive nights, it shows that they deserve to be in the top 10 still. All right, now those are the matchups that are not involved in the First Point Collegiate Challenge to watch for. Now for the First Point Collegiate Challenge at the Austin Convention Center, and these are all Central Standard Time. So the First Point Collegiate Challenge starts off on Friday, where number 13 USC takes on number 14 Ball State. 1:30 p.m. is the start time. Remember, all Central Time. For USC, they haven't really gotten too much of a challenge, as now they take on a team that's right behind them in the coaches poll. Don't be surprised if Ball State does win, but USC is starting to figure things out really quick. They just need a challenge. They beat Lincoln Memorial last week, and they also beat Harvard, both in 4 sets. But how will they fare against their first-ranked opponent of the season? I know Lincoln Memorial was receiving votes in the AVCA coaches poll, but it's not really the same thing in my opinion. I think for USC, they really got to play their you-know-what's off. And I think they have a good shot at this, but Ball State, in my opinion, they are kind of battle-tested. They've taken on UC San Diego, swept them. They lost to BYU twice, which is a bummer. But for Ball State and USC, it's going to be a great match overall. And then we have the match of the whole Collegiate Challenge. Number 1 UCLA taking on number 4 Ohio State. That's going to be approximately at 4 p.m. Central Time. It's going to be after USC Ball State. All right, UCLA gets a very big test in the Buckeyes. If Ohio State wants to prove itself, they have to win this match. But I will also say, even if they lose, my opinion won't change on them. I think they're a good team that is a possible team to watch for in terms of winning the whole shebang, the whole national championship. But for Ohio State, I will say this: they need a signature-ish win, and they also need to learn to not lose set ones. They just can't afford to lose a set one. If they can take the first set, they could really put UCLA in a tough position. But even if you take the first set, it doesn't guarantee you the win. I just think that Ohio State has struggled in first sets this season, losing a first set to Damon, losing a first set to St. Francis, and losing a first set to UC San Diego. So Ohio State needs to start off strong and make sure they put UCLA in a pressurized situation at the service line. And then closing out the First Point Collegiate Challenge is number 8 Stanford taking on number 7 Penn State. That's going to be at approximately 6:30 p.m. Central Time. All right, another top 10 matchup. Stanford versus Penn State. Both teams are undefeated. Stanford has been a little bit more battle-tested, taking on the likes of Loyola Chicago and UC Santa Barbara in terms of ranked teams. Penn State hasn't really had that same battle testing, as their only ranked opponent that they faced is Lewis. And now the schedule really picks up. It's not just going to be this week, but next week when they take on the Ohio State. And that's going to be a big-time matchup. It's a big-time matchup, and I bet you anything it's going to be on the Big Ten Network. So Penn State kind of needs to really prove themselves. I think they are a very good team, but are they amongst the ranks of like Long Beach State and UCLA and Hawaii? That's still my big burning question. They're definitely good in their conference, but for the entirety of National Collegiate Men's Volleyball, this is kind of their weekend to really prove themselves. And I even said so on X. This is the week that we're going to see which teams deserve to be ranked where. So that's that for Friday's matchups. Then for Saturday's matchups at the First Point Collegiate Challenge, we have number 13 USC taking on number 4 Ohio State at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. Okay, well, it's another big-time matchup for USC, but this time it gets really big just because USC plays Ohio State, and they're going to be playing each other a second time in the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge. can't believe I'm saying that, but still. Soon, UCLA and USC are going to be classified as Big Ten teams. But UCLA and Ohio State will be playing each other in that challenge. I want to say it's going to be at Galen Center, but I'm not entirely certain. So for USC, again, this is the week where they really have to prove themselves. And this is a big-time match. If they can win both these matchups, I really will be sold that USC is a definite contender. But Ohio State is just really good. Can they slow down the likes of Jacob Pastor? Can they slow down all the other talented players at Ohio State or on Ohio State? Can they put pressure on them on the service line? Those are the big burning questions, and I really think USC is going to have to step up big time. Next up, we have number 8 Stanford taking on number 14 Ball State. That will start at approximately 4 p.m. Central Time or whenever Ohio State USC gets done. All right, Ball State them and USC are kind of the odd men out. Because here's the thing. Ball State's a good team, but without Tanashi Indavazocheva, they're just not the same team, especially when they take on a team that's kind of better than them. I think Ball State can compete with Stanford, but with all the returning talent that Stanford has, and with Will Rotman just being a powerhouse, I think Stanford will probably win. But don't be surprised if Ball State makes Stanford sweat. I think Stanford kind of sweated against UC Santa Barbara and a little bit against Loyola, minus the first match, of course. But for Stanford, they kind of now have the big challenges out of their way to start. They took on Loyola, won that one with Loyola's true potential. They beat Santa Barbara on the road in very close fashion in the first match, and they also beat him in the second match. But both those matches were extremely competitive. For Stanford, they really have to show up. It's not just against Penn State, but against Ball State too. Stanford, in my opinion, is a sneaky good team, and I really think that they can topple or compete with UCLA. But that is an big if they can. And that's a big maybe, because I'm not trying to say Stanford is not on the level of UCLA, but nobody really is, because UCLA returns a lot of their players from last year, minus a few. But for Stanford, this is kind of the match where they have to really prove themselves. And then the last matchup of the First Point Collegiate Challenge is number 1 UCLA taking on number 7 Penn State at approximately 6:30 p.m. Central Time, or whenever Stanford Ball State gets done. All right, for UCLA, this is kind of the week where they are facing top 10 tier opponents. For Penn State, it's kind of the same thing, except Penn State has a lot more to prove. UCLA has the most pressure on them because they're number 1, and every team is going to want their best shot. They did a great job of taking down Loyola, but against Lewis, they won that one, but it was rather close. Lewis was just hanging around UCLA for a big chunk of the match. So for UCLA, they really have to prove themselves this week. And honestly, I would not be surprised if Penn State made UCLA sweat. Because remember, the first loss for UCLA last year was against Penn State. Don't be surprised if, for some weird reason, Penn State pulls off the win over UCLA. And I'm expecting a big-time matchup from those two, because John Speraw and Mark Pavlik are both set point guests. And I also got to remember that Kevin Birch is also a former guest on Set Point. So you have that to look forward to as well. And I'm definitely looking forward to being there. If you're in attendance at the First Point Collegiate Challenge in the Austin Convention Center in Austin, Texas, definitely come say hi to me. I'll probably be by the media table because I'm volleyball media and whatnot. But I would not be surprised. I would not mind if you all met me and we all got to chat about volleyball. I'm definitely going to be chatting about volleyball in regards to the First Point Collegiate Challenge. I definitely want to meet Mick Haley because he's kind of one of the founders and one of the key contributors for the First Point Collegiate Challenge. And Thursday, for those that are wondering, there's going to be a media day for the First Point Collegiate Challenge, which if I had known that earlier, I would have gone to Austin a little bit sooner, but it's all good. And then they had some volleyball clinics. I want to say they're going to be having some volleyball clinics this week, as well as maybe they had it last week at certain other locations. But there are going to be volleyball clinics regarding to like certain coaches and maybe Mick Haley himself. For those of you that don't know who Mick Haley is, he is the former USC women's volleyball coach and former Texas coach. He won national championships with both teams, and he is currently the co-host of Six Rotations, hosted by Daniel Gilman, former Set Point guest. And I'm looking forward to the First Point Collegiate Challenge. I really want to meet a lot of volleyball enthusiasts and volleyball minds and volleyball everything. So if you see me, I'll be in the Set Point Polo, and I'll definitely be glad to chat volleyball with you and maybe just have a few pictures and just hopefully grow Set Point. Because the big thing about me being at the First Point Collegiate Challenge is I want to meet the coaches and the players and maybe have weekly guests on Set Point and maybe outside of Set Point and have them on like a video or a Zoom interview and whatnot. So honestly, I look forward to meeting all the players. I've not seen Stanford volleyball live. I rarely see Penn State and Ball State as well as Ohio State. And I semi-rarely see USC and UCLA. That's only on a good day. So hopefully it'll be a fun time at the First Point Collegiate Challenge. Hence why this title is called Set Point Meets First Point. It's the 2 points that are facing one another. So I think you get the point in regards to all of this. But with all that being done and said, that's going to do it for this week's matchups in Week 3 of the NCAA men's volleyball season. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Shout out to the chat room, Ralph Calise, Larry B, and Adam Carnick for popping in. I really do appreciate y'all tuning in and listening for a bit. I will be back next Monday for Set Point. I should be back from Austin by Monday. And also, if you're in the Austin area and you see me, I'll have glasses on and a little bit of a beard and a little bit of curly hair. So that's basically all you need to know. And Texas volleyball fans, if you come to the Austin Convention Center and see me, I would totally not mind chatting with you about volleyball and Texas volleyball. But for everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action. I will see you on Friday for the First Point Collegiate Challenge and Thursday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!